Hello there, welcome to Bryan Lomax Movie Talk and my top 50 action movies. So this is a video that I'm doing in conjunction with Cody Leach, who is also doing his top 50 action movies. We have already both done our top 50 comedies and we will be doing our top 50 horror movies as well. Now, obviously, these lists are very subjective, and obviously there is a lot of room for interpretation. Now, action movies, so hard to quantify or qualify just what determines is an action movie, because there are many movies on this list, on my list, that I am sure will rub people the wrong way for being here. There's a lot of comic book movies on this list, must be said. I'm a big fan of comic book related movies. I'm sure that alone will rub people the wrong way. They're not primarily action movies, they're sci-fi or fantasy or superhero or this, that and the other. You can get into all manner of troubles when it comes to trying to distinguish just what genre a film fits into these days. Nothing's ever quite simple. You got movies like Die Hard, which, boom, that is an action movie, straight up. There's no two ways about it. That is just, it's an action film. It just sits into that category. So when I came up with this list, I was torn. Do I just go for movies like Die Hard, that, straight up action? And if so, does that mean I can't have films like Aliens, which is really a sci-fi action horror? I would say it's equally weighted in all three of those, personally, myself. So does that mean I'd have to jettison that from the list? It was mind-bogglingly complicated to try and come up with the rules for this list. So in the end, I just said, to heck with it. If it's an action movie, it's an action movie. If it fits in another genre as well, if it's equally weighted, then fine, whatever. But if it has, big action set pieces in it that kind of get the adrenaline pumping, it's an action movie, or it certainly warrants being on a action movies list. Just wanted to get that out of the way, put that up front, because I know that with these things, people get rather heated, and I will probably take some flack for some of the movies that are on this list. But with that out of the way, please bear in mind, this is subjective. This is my list, not your list. Let's get into it. I'm not going to talk about every single movie on this list, because this would be a long video. As I said with the comedies one, I will gloss over a lot of these and just kind of talk about the ones, or touch on the ones that perhaps I've not really talked about on my channel all that much before. So yeah, there you go. Top 50 action movies. Let's do it.
You have to die until you change the outcome.
Edge of Tomorrow, or Live, Die, Repeat, or Live, Die, Repeat, Edge of Tomorrow, whatever it's called. Yeah, incredible action sequences in it, but more than that, it's a comedy, it's a science fiction film, it's a thriller. So right off the bat, the first movie on this list, jumping straight into all those problems that I just parroted on about. What is it? Is it sci-fi? Is it action? Is it comedy? It's got big action sequences in it, and they're really great, and the movie itself is really great. So it sits here at number 50. And who doesn't want to see Tom Cruise get killed on multiple occasions? After revitalising the James Bond franchise with GoldenEye, director Martin Campbell tried his hand to a lesser known kind of quantity with Zorro. It's not a character that people didn't know about, but he hadn't been touched on for many years. You think of Errol Flynn and those kind of, that era when you think of Zorro. It'd been a long time since he'd been kind of translated to film, and it was suspect as to whether or not it would work. The studio clearly went with the right director, because this is an incredible action film. It's also a really great kind of period adventure movie. Antonio Banderas, really great in the role of Zorro. Anthony Hopkins kind of filling the role of the older Zorro, the one who came before him as his mentor figure. And some really great chemistry and sass between Banderas and Catherine Zeta-Jones, who kind of plays the love interest. So yeah, but beyond that, the action sequences in it are really incredible. Campbell has demonstrated before, as with GoldenEye, that he is very capable of putting together really good action set pieces, and here he goes all out to really demonstrate that. The explosion at the end is one of the best that's ever been committed to film, in my opinion. It's really incredible work, really fiery, really, yeah, packs a punch. Some great sword fights throughout, and some really amazing physical stunt work involving horses and stuff. It really, it takes you back to that old school kind of filmmaking, you know, those adventure serials from the 40s and 50s and whatnot. And yeah, all the better for it. Really great film. Peter Jackson's King Kong remains today my favourite iteration of the character. Can you call it a character? It is still a character, isn't it? Yeah, the monster, if you want to call him that, with a gentle heart. Yeah, King Kong, 1933 is a classic for obvious reasons, but let's face it, it doesn't have as much oomph today as it once did. And again, that's not me putting it down. It's just simple fact that, you know, as time marches on, special effects start to look outdated and don't quite have the same impact they once did. But it's still a great story, still a great film. I think there's been quite a few missteps since then on the road to getting to Peter Jackson's King Kong. But once we got there, yeah, you know, this was a labour of love for Jackson, King Kong being one of his favourite movies. And coming off the back of Lord of the Rings, he pretty much had the clout to do whatever project he wanted. The studio would pretty much give him a blank check. And yeah, he made King Kong. And there's a couple of moments in it where special effects feel like they're not quite finished. Maybe they could have done with a bit more time. I'm thinking primarily the Brontosaurus attack. You know, there's a stampede, not so much an attack as a stampede. The effects work on that scene really doesn't look great. But then for a 3-hour movie, the rest of it, other than that scene, the rest of it is on point. Great effects work, brilliant character stuff. The cinematography looks beautiful. I love the period detail, setting it in the 30s. I like the fact that he made the choice to keep it in the 30s. And yeah, the standout set piece in the middle of the film where Kong goes up against 2 T-Rexes or 3. He fights some T-Rexes anyway. For some reason, I think it's 3. But that whole set piece, it's like 10, 12, 15 minutes long, something like that. It's a beast of an action scene. It's really incredible. There's some great moments of horror in it as well. You know, for an adventure film that's kind of like family orientated, there's some pretty horrific moments in it. The stuff with the insect hive, that may be in the extended cut though. I can't remember now. It's been a while since I saw the theatrical cut and I can't quite remember what's in what. But if you've seen the extended cut, yeah, that scene gets even more gnarly with all the insects kind of, yeah, it's very horrific. Definitely something that is in Jackson's wheelhouse. This is a director who came from horror, let's not forget. But yeah, incredible adventure film with some really great action set pieces in it. This isn't the last film that you will see on this list by Edgar Wright, and that is for good reason. He knows how to construct a really good action sequence, and this film is really built for that. The concept is very simple. One young man has to go up against his girlfriend's, is it seven evil exes? I think it's, yeah, 7 evil exes. And yeah, it's basically ever more elaborate fight sequences. So the plot is really just an excuse for Edgar Wright to show off his ability at constructing different fight sequences. You know, so it's an action film through and through, but it's also filled with great characters and loads of really funny comedy, some really good laughs in it. So yeah, but the battle sequences, the fight sequences are very inventive, must be said. Like I say, Edgar Wright knows how to use the camera, the way he moves it to inject humour within the scene, and yeah, just keep things hypermobile, so to speak. It's a blast from start to finish, and I think that, yeah, the action genre is definitely Edgar Wright's wheelhouse, because when he sticks in the action genre, he excels at it. And Scott Pilgrim for me is his most underrated work, I think. It's not the one that springs to mind most, I think, when people think Edgar Wright. I think they tend to go with like Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz, but absolutely Scott Pilgrim versus the World, incredible film. Originally released in 1959 and setting the record at the time for the most Oscars that any film had won, BenHur is, of course, the oldest film that you will find on this list. And again, it's an adventure movie. It's about this man's journey from a person who's lacking in faith to someone who's full of faith. It's a great film, but it really is most memorable, I think we can all agree, for those chariot race scenes. Now, it takes a long time before we get to those chariot race scenes, but when we get there, it is absolutely breathtaking. The action, the way it's shot, is well ahead of its time. What they had to do to get the shots that they got, famously a stuntman lost his life on the making of those sequences. And yeah, it's a breathtaking set piece, it must be said. For 1959, it still holds up. You watch it today and it still has you on the edge of your seat, and that's what makes it one of the best action films ever made. Like I say, it's not just an action film, there's a lot more to it than that, but when it gets to the action, it's still breathtaking, it's still tense, it's still incredibly immersive.
This guy comes to town every Tuesday. Are you free Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm free Tuesday.
Leon, for me, is still director Luc Besson's best film. I don't think he's ever been better, obviously, because I've just said it's his best film. But yeah, just incredible character stuff in it with Leon the hitman and this young girl, Matilda, that he kind of reluctantly becomes a surrogate father to. We've got Gary Oldman on absolute top villainous form, really chewing up scenery, and yeah, just the final act of the film is just this one elongated action set piece that's very tense, mostly because Besson has done his work in creating characters that we love, that we are connected to, that we don't want to see hurt. And yeah, the stakes are raised and we're set up for a great finale that is really action-packed. Samurai, for me, is a film that I've been meaning to kind of review on my channel, so I don't know how in-depth I will go into it here, but I do have to say that it is one of the most forgotten films, I think. I'm not saying it's completely forgotten, but I feel like it deserves more attention. I feel like more people should talk about this film. When it came out, I think a lot of people kind of said it was like Tom Cruise Dances with Wolves, kind of, his version of Dances with Wolves. Dances with Samurai is how they put it. They apply the same logic to Avatar. Dances with Wolves in space. The fact of the matter is, it's just a universal story. That idea of the outsider coming into another community and blending into that community, becoming one with that community and fighting for that community. It's a timeless story. Dances with Wolves, certainly I'm sure wasn't the first time we'd seen a story like that, and it won't be the last. But yeah, it's all in the execution. And the execution here by Edward Zwick, the director, is absolutely immaculate. It's a brilliant story. Tom Cruise is on fine form, and I really love Japanese culture anyway, so getting immersed in this world for 2.5 hours is right up my alley. I saw this film a year after having gone to Japan. I was at the height of my love for Japan and Japanese culture at the time. So yeah, it's a great film for me. I love it. Brilliant story, brilliant characters, incredible action sequences. You've got these big battle sequences in which samurai are going up against Western artillery. It's just, touching, explosive, incredible. Speaking of Avatar, yes, here it is. I find this film incredibly underrated. I think it's kind of become an easy target over the years. It did incredibly well at the box office. People loved it when it came out. And then it's one of those films that over time it's become cool to bash. It's like, it's just Dances with Wolves in space. It's like, okay. But Dances with Wolves was a really incredible film that won Best Picture at the Oscars. So what you're saying is, as a criticism, this is very much like that film that won all the Oscars and was an incredible film. So if that's the best criticism you've got, I'm afraid you need to do better than that. It's not the first time that a film kind of takes ideas from another film and then puts its own spin on it. Again, like I say, it's all in the execution, and for me, this film does just as good a job, if not better, than what Last Samurai did with that concept. The world is, again, like with Last Samurai, incredibly immersive, it's incredibly inventive. You look at some of the stuff, the environments that Cameron has created here on Pandora, and you feel like you could literally step into that world, that it feels real, it feels tangible. I think we get a really great villain in Stephen Lang's character. He's just all menace. I believe he's returning for the sequels, which I don't know how that's going to work, but either way, I'll be happy to have him back because I thought his villain in this film was awesome. Just real badass. So it was just, again, Cameron, when it comes to sci-fi and action and the melding of the two, nobody does it better than Cameron. Avatar, while not his best work, it is still super fine and just, like I say, incredibly underrated. Gladiator, for me, remains perhaps Russell Crowe's most defining role. I personally kind of like what he brought to LA Confidential as well, but that was more of a ensemble piece, whereas this, he is the main star. This made him a bona fide kind of Hollywood blockbuster spearhead, so to speak. You know, he put him at the forefront. You know, he could get whatever roles he wanted by after this film, and for good reason. You know, he brings a lot of heft to the role, a lot of charisma, and yeah, Maximus Decimus Meridius is one of the best kind of characters that we've had in cinema. Someone that you really root for and feel for. You know, lost his whole family because of Joaquin Phoenix's Emperor and the way he treated him, and you're on this journey with him as he travels from being a soldier, a hero, to a slave, back to to a gladiator, and working his way to vengeance, to finding that vengeance. But yeah, incredible story. The action set pieces in it are absolutely brilliant. You know, the use of effects work to kind of heighten the environment and make you feel like you're back in the Colosseum 2,000 years ago. It's just, Ridley Scott, I think Ridley Scott had a bit of a damp patch before Gladiator, and I think it was Gladiator that really kind of put him back to being that A-list guy we knew from Alien and Blade Runner and that kind of period. But yeah, it just shows that, you know, never think that he's down and out when he is just down, because he can always come back swinging, and he certainly did with Gladiator.
The story of a warrior, the woman he loved, and a princess destined to become a warrior.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon picked up the Oscar for Best Film in a Foreign Language. Personally, I think it should have got Best Film, period. A real tapestry of different lives, different characters. There doesn't seem to be a main character as such. I guess Michelle Yeoh's character would take that, but it just, I don't know, it feels like a lot of emphasis is placed on multiple characters. This introduced Zhang Ji to me, at any rate. She had done other films before this, back in her native China, but this was the one that kind of really put her on the map, made me take notice. She became my favourite actress for quite a while after this film was released. Incredible performance in it. Chow Yun-fat as well, really good in this film. Quite a subdued performance. You know, he's playing a man that's keeping a lot inside, kind of wound up like a tight ball, but trying to keep cool and not show too much emotion and whatnot. It's just, it's a great film. It's got one of the best sword fights ever put to celluloid for my money. You know, the fight scene between Yao and Ji is really incredible. One of my favourite action sequences of all time. I think the flying kind of stuff puts a lot of people off. You know, it's part of a genre of Chinese martial arts movies called wushu, in which, you know, they kind of defy the laws of gravity, the laws of physics and whatnot. But I think if you look at it as a fairy tale, if you look at the world that exists in these movies as like a fairy tale, it's like an Asian version of what a fairy tale would be. Coming at it from that angle, then I think it makes those kind of scenes a lot more palatable, a lot more watchable, and you can switch off to the fact that they are defying the laws of physics. This film kind of reignited, well, I wouldn't say reignited, it ignited this style of movie. Obviously, they'd had this kind of movie in the Asian markets for a long time. You know, you go back to A Touch of Zen, films like that. But this is the one that kind of brought it to Western audiences. And as a result, films like Hero, House of Flying Daggers, Curse of the Golden Flower became successes over in Western markets. But that's, again, like I said, because of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It's a great film. Really shows that Ang Lee is a master of his craft, and one of those directors who can really hop into any genre and make it his own, which for me is a sign of what makes a truly great director. or one of the signs at any rate. So for this position, I haven't split up the Lord of the Rings films. I've not put them in order because for me, Lord of the Rings is one film. It just so happens to have been split up into three. But we're not talking a case here like, say, the Dark Knight trilogy or the original Star Wars trilogy, where if the first film hadn't have been successful and you didn't get the two films that came after it, then that film would just, it wouldn't have an ending. It'd be like it was just aimless. It's just, great, you've left us on a cliffhanger and that's it. No, if we didn't get Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi, Star Wars would still work as a standalone film. If we didn't get The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, Batman Begins would still work as a standalone film. You can't say that with Lord of the Rings. You get to the end of Fellowship of the Ring, everything's in tatters, the Fellowship has been disbanded, we're on a complete cliffhanger, one of our main characters has just been killed. Where does this leave them? Cut to credits. No. If we didn't get Two Towers and Return of the King, Fellowship of the Ring would not work. It would be an incomplete story. So, like I say, it's one film split into three, which is why it sits here at number 11 as one film and not three parts. Again, the world that Peter Jackson creates, it feels like another world, It feels like Middle-earth, precisely what it is. All shot in New Zealand, obviously, but it just... There's a reason that New Zealand the tourist market in New Zealand skyrocketed after Lord of the Rings, because what Jackson does with the New Zealand kind of landscape is paint a completely different world, and it's a world that you just want to visit. You want to see these places where hobbits kind of walked, where their footsteps went, where Aragorn fought Urukai and things like that. It's just really great production design. Some of the physical constructions, the towns and whatnot that they created. It's just every aspect of the Lord of the Rings is just masterful. It's an immersive world. That's really the best word for it, is that when you watch these films, you just feel like you've gone to a completely other place. And considering that before they were released, there really was a lot of talk about how this book could possibly be adapted. Some people are saying it was pretty much unfilmable. And Jackson proved everybody wrong and made one of the greatest trilogies of all time. So there has already been a few Zack Snyder films on this list. Say what you want about the guy, he knows how to shoot an action scene. It's one of the criticisms he gets for some of his films is that there's too much action, but whatever. For me personally, Watchmen still remains his best work. It's, again, speaking of unfilmable books, you think about Watchmen, how many directors were actually attached to this film before it finally got made. So many directors kind of came and went, that it did garner that reputation that perhaps it is unfilmable. So Zack Snyder comes along as a comic book fan and says, you know what, actually, let's just translate it straight from the page to the screen and it works, you know. And even the changes that he makes, the subtle changes here and there, for me, are actually improvements. You know, they make it better. So yeah, but it's just an incredible tapestry. Again, I use that word. I've used it once already, but just all these different characters interweaving in and out of each other's lives, and it's kind of, we have different chapters where 1 minute we're focusing on Rorschach and next minute we're focusing on Night Owl, and it's just, yeah, it's a brilliant piece of work. It's very complex, it's very dark, the action sequences in it are absolutely brilliant. It's got a lot to say about the human condition and where mankind could be heading if we don't change certain things about ourselves. It's just, yeah, it's heavy, it's dense, it's visually stunning from start to finish. Again, you know, something that you can't say about Snyder is that he doesn't know how to put visuals together. It's the one thing that you can say about him, is that he knows how to make something look incredibly beautiful, and this film certainly does. Another adaptation of an Alan Moore graphic novel. This one is V for Vendetta, obviously, and it is directed by James McTeague. Although when it was kind of, you know, just before it was released and all the trailers came out, all the marketing was, you know, from the directors of the Matrix trilogy, you know, and James McTeague was a second unit director on Matrix trilogy, so I guess that still stands. But yeah, I think a lot of people thought that this was by the Wachowskis. They did write the script and they produced it, but yes, James McTeague directed it. I think he doesn't quite get enough credit, to be honest. But I didn't like this film as much when it first came out as I do now. And it's because of that marketing. You know, this is still an action film, absolutely, but it's definitely also a political thriller. You know, the action sequences that we get in it are really incredible, and they're on that kind of Matrix level where, you know, with the kung fu and whatnot that's going on in them. There just aren't as many as you would expect when you look at that marketing. When you look at the trailers that were released, they showed all the action stuff in it and made you think that it's going to be like on the level of the Matrix. You know, the Matrix kind of feels like wall-to-wall action, whereas this, it doesn't. There's a lot more story, there's a lot more character development and stuff going on. But as I say, the action that's in it is really, really great. So yeah, it is one of the best action movies ever made, but it's also one of the best thrillers ever made. I gave it like a 3-star rating when it first came out because, like I say, I felt like it was a bit missold. It wasn't quite as action heavy as I thought it was going to be. But once I knew what I was getting, once I knew what the film was, and I revisited it, it just got better on each watch. You know, on my second watch, I would have given it a 4-star film. And then on my third watch, it was like a 5-star film. So it is one of those rare occasions where each time I watch it, the film just gets better and speaks to me a lot more. So yeah, V for Vendetta. If you haven't checked it out, do check it out. If you have checked it out and you were a bit ho-hum on it, give it a second watch, give it a second try, because like I say, for me, it's only increased in enjoyment with each viewing.
What if you do got me boxed in and I gotta put you down? Because no matter what, you will not get in my way. Heat
is one of the films on this list that I had the most trouble kind of placing here. And even Cody messaged me at one point when he was putting his list together. Do you think Heat's an action film? And it's like, And in the end, I had to say yes, because although it isn't littered with action throughout, it does have one of the single greatest action set pieces for my money ever put on screen. And it's this kind of 10 to 15 minute shootout. It's the best shootout actually ever. Name one gun battle that is better than that centerpiece in Heat. It feels real. There's no music, there's no incidental music to tell you how to feel. It's all in the action. It's all in the characters going through what they're going through, the gunfire surrounding them. Like I say, no music of any kind. It's brilliantly crafted. Michael Mann, this is his magnum opus. I don't think he's ever going to make a film as good as Heat again. Like I say, it's mostly like a cop thriller. But for that action set piece alone, it's really an extended set piece. It's like I say, it's right at the centre of the film. It's everything that the film is leading to. And when it comes, it's just like a blitzkrieg. It's fantastic. And it still holds up today, still has the same impact today when you watch it. Most films, I think, would end on that. That would be the final battle. It'd be, but obviously the Heat has a lot more to say afterwards. But yeah, it's just, what can I say? It's Heat. It's one of the best films ever made. And while I accept the view that most people might argue it's not really an action film, I do have to disagree. There's a few action set pieces in it, but this one in particular, that standout shootout scene alone, is what makes this film have a deserved place on this list, and one so high. Of course, The Dark Knight was going to be my number one choice. It is an action film. It's my favourite film of all time, so clearly it's got to be in the number one spot. Now, I completely accept that there will be movies out there that has action sequences in them that are maybe better shot or orchestrated than anything in this, but just as a cohesive whole, as a film in general, it's my number one. So it is an action film, so of course I'm going to put it at my number one. Like I say, James Cameron at 2 and 3 with the Terminator 2 and Aliens. Dude knows how to make a sequel. Certainly knows how to make a sequel. Yeah, that is my list. Now, you may, for those who know me, who know what my favourite movies are, you might be asking, well, where's Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises then? I didn't want this list to just become like most of the lists on my channel, in which it's just Batman, 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 Nolan, Nolan, Nolan. So I chose the one Batman film from that trilogy. But let's face it, my top 3 would be the Dark Knight trilogy. But how many times can I talk about the Dark Knight trilogy before people get seriously bored with me? Even I get bored with me, quite frankly, the amount of times I talk about those movies. So yeah, Dark Knight trilogy at number 1. Cameron really kind of following up in the rear with his movies. Definitely, probably my favourite action director on the whole, to be honest, is Cameron. But yeah, Nolan took it once again with that number 1 spot. That is my top 50 action movies. I'm sure my choices will have caused some consternation amongst many people. Why isn't there more Asian cinema on there? Where's The Raid and The Raid 2? And while I do think films like The Raid, and particularly The Raid 2, have action sequences in them that are better orchestrated than much of what appears on this list, I will say the thing that I always say, that I repeat ad nauseum, is that for me, movies are about character and story first and foremost. And I always think no matter what genre you're working in, if you adhere to that first and foremost, you're going to end up with a better film. So while, yes, The Raid, films like that, the Asian market, have a lot more films that have action sequences in them that kind of obliterate most of the stuff that is on my list, they don't always have the best kind of stories and character development, The Raid being included. So, I look at The Raid and I think, there isn't a right lot of story there, and there ain't a right lot of character development, to be honest. It is all about the action. So I get that. You know, I understand why people would be disappointed films like that aren't on this list, but that's my reasons. For me, it's about story, it's about character, and yeah, if the action kind of propels the story and the character, all the better for it. And that's why my list is my list. But I want to hear your lists. Put them down below. Let me know what your favourite action movies of all time are. Go over and check Cody Leach's list if you haven't already. Thank you for watching this video, and until next time, crack in. Hello. Thank you. Plantains. Ta.